understanding money. So we're super excited to walk through that story today and get all of the history and context. So Lyn, I think I want to start with the first question, and maybe we could do things the way you did things in your book, which is kind of chronological. But the most basic fundamental question in our mind today at the beginning of this episode, what is money?
So I think the old school definition of money remains very appropriate today, which is that it's a medium of exchange, liquid store of value, and unit of account. It's basically a signaling mechanism. It's a ledger that we use to communicate value, to store value, to transfer value. And it's generally that useful intermediate state between, things we're going to consume or more risky or illiquid assets we might want to own longer term. It is this liquid medium that we use. And it's very, like you said, it's very important technology. Another way of kind of framing that is that money is that which solves the need for barter and avoids the double coincidence of wants. And so in a world without money, any form of money, if we wanted to trade with each other, let's say we were in a more primitive context and we want to trade something, we have to find something that I have extra of that you are deficient in, and that you have extra of something that I'm deficient in, right? So that's actually kind of a hard combination. There's so many frictions or ways that trade can fail. And so generally there's two main ways to lubricate trade, to basically make, reduce the frictions there. One would be deferring transactions across time. And so, for example, if you need something now, but I don't need something from you right now, I'm pretty good and I have some surpluses, I could give it to you either because I'm banking up some social savings, or in another context, we could formalize it so that you owe me something in the future. So I'm taking on some degree of counterparty risk, but I'm basically, kind of in my way, stockpiling savings and you're getting a need met. And the other way to do it is to have a kind of a super commodity, a liquid, scarce, portable, divisible unit that we never really have too much of. Like, how many people complain about having too many gold coins or too many dollars, for example? We can always use more. There's only so much furniture I want. There's only so much, another house would be a burden. There's only so many financial things or consumable things that I want, but portable, dense, liquid stores of value I can always use more of. And so in a hunter-gatherer concept or context, generally shell beads were among the earliest types of money, which is basically that if you don't know what else to trade, various types of kind of hard-to-make portable ornamentation served as money. They were kind of the invention of liquid savings, the invention of store of value, because you could always have more of them. They were wearable, which increased their portability. They were small, they were dense, they were divisible, and so that basically, if you have one commodity that all trades can be denominated in, that makes other trades easier too. So there's really kind of different camps about what money is. And they both mainly arise from the two primary ways to solve the double coincidence of wants, which is either that time deferment or that universal unit of account.
Okay, so we have this double coincidence of wants where I'm a blacksmith, you're an apple farmer. You want my sword, I want some of your apples to feed my family. So what do we do in those cases? Or maybe actually I don't want the apples. Maybe I have enough apples would be more accurate. Well, I could give you the sword, and I don't want any of your apples. Maybe I have enough apples. I want to buy some wheat. And there's two ways for us to make that transaction. One is an IOU. You could say, hey, Ryan, I owe you one. I'll get you more apples next season when your family really needs it. And that's kind of the idea of credit-based money, IOU-based money. Or the other is we formalize across our society some sort of super commodity, beads, shells, maybe later on a silver or a gold or something that the entire society recognizes as incredibly valuable, right? Some super commodity, and that solves that problem and that completes the transaction. And that's the basis of the two forms of money, right? And the two theories of money, the commodity-based money, which is like a gold or a beads or a shells, and then also the credit-based money, which would be in the form of the IOU.
Yeah, they've often been in opposition. Different economists or theorists will have different ideas about what money is, but they're both solving the same general problem, which is making trade easier between parties that don't necessarily want what the other one has, and storing value. And what they have in common is that they're both ledgers, and there's just different maintainers of that ledger. So if you're relying on a super commodity, you're relying on nature to set the boundaries for that ledger. How hard are the units to make? And the ledger's updated with physical possession, right? So there's only so much gold in a region. make it into gold coins. We're bounded by the parameters of nature. Nobody can just print more gold. And so we're kind of relying on nature to set the bounds of that ledger. Or if we're relying on credit, then we're relying on depending on what size we're doing it. It could be our tribe, could be, in Babylon, the temples had this more extensive kind of, clay tablet ledger system. Today we have central banks. Whatever scale you're working at, you're relying on humans' ability to control that ledger, to come to an agreement on the ledger. Sometimes there could be competing ledgers. And so money is in many ways an emergent phenomenon in the sense that, it's not an accident that we pick gold rather than apples as money. Anyone who tries to pick apples as money is going to have a really bad time, and it's going to select itself out. But there's also occasionally, or now more frequently, top-down impositions of money, where they get to kind of define local monopolies if they have the power to do so. But then, of course, on an international scale, even those monopolies are competing with other monopolies for money. So money is still a market when you zoom out in the global sense.
I really want to drill down into that emergence phenomenon because I think that's one of the reasons why the story of money is so cool. Emergent phenomenons are complex and they're nuanced and they have different parameters based on the variables in which they arise. Talking about just like this idea of credit-based money where like Ryan's got something that I want, but I don't have something that he wants. But since him and I have a social relationship, I can just owe him one. And that is something of based on trust. And that works because of the relationship that Ryan and I have. And that starts to create some sort of credit-based money. When we talk about the other end of the spectrum, the super commodity money, that credit, that relationship that I have with Ryan, the technology of money can embody that relationship with someone that I don't have that relationship with. And so there's this, the barter myth that I think has been, it's the meme is that like, okay, we all have these like goods, but there's no money substrate. And so like we all come together and be like, hey, let's just pick up money because it's easier to barter. Like that's from understanding like the history of human progression. It's kind of like that, but it's also just a little bit not like that because money has come about in so many different ways based on just like the size of the tribe and the actual money, like what is the thing that is being transacted. Can you talk about just like the different ways that money emerges just to facilitate a need?
Sure. So there's been different schools of thought on that, and we get more evidence over time. And generally, the way I would summarize it is that barter is so inefficient that it rarely arises naturally. And when it does arise, it's usually things are not going great, and it's usually like a temporary phenomenon. And so money emerged so early because barter was a problem so early. So it's not like we had this long era of barter and then
we invented money.
Yeah, that's kind of the original thought is when you looked at, say, some of the early commodity theorists, they were like imagining like, a blacksmith and a bread maker and then being like, yeah, these guys must have had a lot of frictions as they try to figure out what to do. But of course, when you go back in history, it was never like that. You never had a society with like blacksmiths and bread makers and no money. And so money is literally the earliest known example might be the Blombos cave in Africa. It's over 70,000 years old. There's evidence of like colored shell beads. The people discovering it were saying that might be the earliest case of like information stored outside of the brain. And so basically going back a very long time, either proto collectibles like proto money, or just groups of credit, groups of deferring, a gift culture, deferring transactions, banking up social savings, keeping tracks of deeds and debts in a society. These have been the two main ways to do it. And like you said, Bessie, if you have relationships with the person that you're trading with, that's when credit can be more useful. Whereas commodity money is more useful if you're dealing with strangers. So in this case, it's almost like credit's the closed source version. You need to be like permissioned in this group for it to make sense. Whereas commodity money is like the open source one. Like you can go up to a stranger, and if you have a gold coin or dollar bill or a useful kind of portable object of some sort, you can trade with them even if you have no relationship with each other. And it's also a way to store value long term that's not a liability. So if you're holding credit for long term, you're relying on the social structure to be there, the people that owe those liabilities or remember your deeds to remember them, right? Your asset is someone else's ongoing liability. Whereas if you have final settlement with something more physical, like a gold coin or a shell bead or something, you have an asset it's an unencumbered asset. It's not someone else's liability. You own it full and clear. It's not reliant on the ongoing memory or liability of someone else. And so what we generally see in complex societies is that you have both types of money working together. So usually a commodity defined the unit of account, right? So in ancient Babylon, you had small bits of silver, you had a meal worth of grain, for example. These would be kind of the unit of account that people would think in. and be defined as. And then you'd either have the physical transfer of the commodities themselves as money, or often to make that easier, you'd have credit built on top of that as well. So it's not like